The Neo Geo library has baseball, basketball, soccer, golf, football, bowling, and even flying disc sports. But there's one major sport missing from this lineup: hockey. Today I want to talk about a game called Hit the Ice, a 1990 arcade game from Taito, and why I think it deserves a second chance as an official Neo Geo AES Plus release. Released by Taito in 1990, Hit the Ice is an arcade hockey game that takes a much more over-the-top approach than a traditional sports simulation. Instead of focusing on realism, the game embraces arcade action, encouraging hard checks, big hits, fights, and fast-paced gameplay. Players compete in 3-on-3 hockey matches, with each team controlled by either one or multiple players depending on the arcade cabinet configuration. While scoring goals is still the objective, roughing up your opponents is often just as important as putting the puck in the net. Although I don't personally have strong nostalgic connection to Hit the Ice, I do remember seeing it in arcades and playing it a few times back in the day. After spending some time with the arcade version recently, I was surprised by just how much fun it still is to play today. Like many successful arcade games of the era, Hit the Ice eventually made its way to several home platforms. The first version I spent some time with was the Super Nintendo release. While it retains the basic gameplay and over-the-top hockey action of the arcade original, some of the visual detail and presentation had to be scaled back to fit the hardware. The Sega Genesis version followed a similar approach. The fast-paced gameplay is still there, along with the checks and fights that made the arcade game memorable. But it's clear that recreating the full arcade experience at home wasn't an easy task in the early 1990s. Hit the Ice also found its way to the TurboGrafx 16. Seeing a game like this appear on NEC's console was pretty impressive at the time, and it's another example of how much effort publishers put into bringing arcade experiences into the living room. There was even a Game Boy version. Obviously, moving an arcade hockey game to a handheld system required some compromises, but it gave players yet another way to experience the game away from the arcade. What's interesting is that despite appearing on all these platforms, one system never received a version of Hit the Ice: the Neo Geo. So after spending some time with all these different versions, I found myself asking a simple question. Why wasn't Hit the Ice ever released on the Neo Geo? When most people think of the Neo Geo, they think of fighting games like Fatal Fury and King of Fighters, but sports games have always been an important part of the system's identity as well. Baseball, soccer, football, basketball, golf, bowling, and even flying disc sports. They're all represented in the Neo Geo library. But hockey never made the roster. That's what makes Hit the Ice such an interesting candidate. Looking at the arcade hardware, the large colorful sprites, the smooth animation, and fast-paced gameplay, it's easy to imagine this fitting right alongside the Neo Geo's existing lineup. In fact, if someone told me Taito used Neo Geo hardware when making this game, I probably would have believed them. Now, I'm certainly not a game developer, and I can't say exactly what would have been involved in bringing it over, but from a player's perspective, this feels like the kind of arcade game that would have been right at home on a Neo Geo. And with the upcoming AES Plus, it's got me wondering, what if that opportunity still exists? The more I thought about it, the more I started imagining what an official AES Plus release of Hit the Ice might actually look like. So just for fun, I decided to create my own concept artwork. I mocked up a Neo Geo AES Plus cartridge, designed a matching game box, and tried to picture what the game might look like sitting alongside the rest of the Neo Geo library. Now to be clear, this is purely a fan concept. Nothing has been announced, and this isn't based on any insider information. It's simply the kind of release I'd love to see if the AES Plus proves successful enough to receive additional games in the future. One of the things that really got me thinking about this was something Papa Brad's Gaming mentioned during one of his live streams. He described each Neo Geo cartridge as representing an arcade cabinet.
Those cartridges are $90, but you're getting an exact replica arcade game that will play exactly like a real arcade machine. How much would it cost to stack up an arcade machine and keep stacking them up? Now, I know it was a cartridge system, but these were real arcade games.
I really like that perspective because it highlights what made the Neo Geo so special. It brought the arcade home in a way that very few systems could. Taking that idea one step further, I think games like Hit the Ice deserve that same opportunity. Even though several home versions already exist, none of them truly recreate the original arcade experience. An official AES Plus release could become the definitive home version while also helping preserve another piece of arcade history for future generations. That's really the idea behind this series. Rather than focusing on entirely new games, I want to explore arcade titles that never made it to the Neo Geo, but realistically could have. Whether it's Taito, Irem, or another arcade publisher, there are still a lot of great games that deserve another look. Of course, there's one obvious challenge. The original arcade version of Hit the Ice supports up to 4 players, while both the original Neo Geo AES and the upcoming AES Plus only have 2 controller ports. At first, I actually wondered if that alone would disqualify it from ever becoming a Neo Geo title. But then I started thinking about accessories that expanded multiplayer on other classic consoles. Systems such as the Nintendo had adapters that allowed more players to join the action, so why couldn't something similar exist for the Neo Geo? That inspired me to create this concept for a hypothetical 4-player adapter. It would connect to the 2 controller ports on the front of the AES Plus, then provide 4 controller ports for compatible games. Now, would everyone use it? Probably not. These days it's hard enough getting 2 people together in the same room, let alone 4. But I don't necessarily see this as something that every Neo Geo owner would need to buy. Instead, I see it as a way to preserve the original arcade experience for games that could really benefit from it. Hit the Ice is one example, but there are plenty of other arcade games that could take advantage of 4-player support if they ever found their way to the Neo Geo AES Plus. Whether something like this is technically practical or commercially viable, I honestly don't know. But it's fun to imagine what a growing AES Plus ecosystem could look like if the platform continues to evolve. So after spending time with the arcade version, revisiting the home ports, and imagining what an official AES Plus release might look like, where do I stand? Personally, I think Hit the Ice would be a fantastic addition to the Neo Geo library. Not because it's one of my favorite childhood games, it isn't, but because I believe it fills a gap that has existed on the platform since the very beginning. If the AES Plus is successful, and SNK and/or Plaion decide to continue expanding the library with officially licensed arcade ports, this is exactly the kind of game I'd love to see considered. It's fast, it's fun, it feels right at home on the Neo Geo, and most importantly, it helps preserve another classic arcade experience for future generations. Of course, that's just my opinion, and I'd really like to hear yours. Would you buy Hit the Ice if it received an official AES Plus release? Do you think it deserves a place in the Neo Geo library, or is there another hockey game you'd rather see instead? What about a 4-player adapter? Let me know down in the comments because I'd love to continue this discussion with all of you. And speaking of 4-player arcade classics,